So, as the Easter season continues, in the traditional readings, we start running into more and more the book of Revelation, these different books that talk about eschatology, the end of the world, kind of where human history is going. It's also been coming up, for whatever random reason, in conversation a lot lately, I guess. As times are in turmoil, people start talking the end of the world and wondering where is God, etc. And so, in the midst of all those circumstances, I guess I couldn't really get away from having us examine a little bit some of this kind of end times theology and some of the book of Revelation itself. Kind of the main way I tend to think of Revelation is actually a lot like climbing a mountain or a 14er. So if you've ever climbed a big old mountain, one of our Colorado 14ers or something like it, you get out to a point about halfway up, maybe 3/4 of the way up if you're really strong, when you just kind of start thinking, like, what am I doing climbing this big old mountain? I am tired. It's much more jarring on your knees and your hips than you probably are expecting, unless you really know what you're doing. And yet, this moment feels like maybe I should just go back. Is this really that worth doing? But if you're lucky, when you're kind of at that point, you can look up higher and you can see kind of the summit. You can see where this thing is headed. And a lot of the time you kind of say, no, I'm this close. That's where I'm headed. Just think of kind of the moment of what it feel like of having conquered this thing. Like, let's just barrel on and let's do this. And I would argue that is largely what the book of Revelation is hoping to do for us. Now, the original audience, of course, would have been people who were either already experiencing or about to experience some pretty severe persecution in the Roman Empire, in the culture in which they were in at the time. And I think the book continues to be one of offering kind of a vision and of hope for people who are suffering, for people who find themselves deeply at odds with the culture around them. So the book of Revelation, I think, has quite the reputation it does, and some of that is just the way people have used it. Some of that is the way people react to it, and some of that is just it's a strange book. It's got a lot of very strong, weird imagery in it. And the book of Revelation itself is a translation of this old genre called apocalypse, which both of those are simply words that mean kind of an unveiling, a showing. I think the image there is very similar to like that moment in The Wizard of Oz, when they run aside and they pull aside the curtain and discover that this monster, this magician, whatever version you're reading or seeing, is in fact just kind of a huckster, kind of this old man, and the whole thing is kind of a show. I think Revelation is doing in some ways the opposite. It's pulling back the curtain and showing many things that seem very ordinary and everyday, whether that's the values of the culture around us, of politics, of people's attitudes and ways they're approaching God. It pulls back that curtain and shows often those things are not so mundane. Those things are often not harmless. They're actually, monstrous and terrible. And I think the book of Revelation is doing that, but it can be hard at times to look past kind of that revelation and that showing, past the weirdness of the imagery itself, to realize how this book can actually be helpful. And so I just want us to remember that prophetic books are primarily not about predicting the future, as Revelation gets stuck kind of in that stereotype of people are always worrying about how to decode it and look at the future. The point of the book is to help us see kind of God's views and values on any times, particularly those in which people are suffering, and how we can maybe have hope and push through those things. And so Revelation itself is a book that I think can be deeply hopeful because it gives us correct perspective. In some sections that's more difficult to do with others, but lucky for us, we get to look at kind of one of these anchor sections, a section when you can kind of glimpse the summit and see what is actually going on. This is a message that was meant to be for both the original audience, people who are suffering deeply, and as a warning to those of us who will have to suffer at times for valuing things as God does, for being at odds with the world, the culture around us, if we are following Christ well. So let me Let me read this section. This section I think is really important because it's maybe one of the most obvious examples of what I'm trying to say, of this kind of this anchor, this glimpse of the summit that should be spurring us on. Because in the book itself, there's some very chaotic sections all around this, and yet here we have this kind of vision of hope of where humanity is kind of ultimately headed. So this is coming out of Revelation chapter 7, verse 9. After this I looked, and there was a great crowd that no one could number. They were from every nation, tribe, people, and language. They were standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They wore white robes and held palm branches in their hands. They cried out in a loud voice, "Victory belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb." All the angels stood in a circle around the throne, and around the elders and the four living creatures. They fell face down before the throne, and they worshipped God, saying, "Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and always. Amen." Then one of the elders said to me, "Who are these people wearing white robes? Where'd they come from?" And I said to him, "Sir, you know." Then he said to me, "These people have come out of great hardship. They have washed their robes and made them white in the Lamb's blood. This is the reason that they are before God's throne. They worship him day and night in his temple, and the one seated on the throne will shelter them. They won't hunger or thirst anymore. No sun or scorching heat will beat down on them, because the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them. He will lead them to the springs of life-giving water, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes." So some of the kind of interesting things I just wanted to point out about this vision, this claim of everyone having come through. So the first one comes this verse 9, and it says, "And after this I looked, and there was a great crowd that no one could number. They were from every nation, tribe, people, and every language." And what I think is important about this section is we can often have these kind of vague, almost ghostly ideas of what heaven is supposed to be like, or what after death is going to look like. And yet these people here still bear the marks of their kind of cultural identities, right? Their languages, their groupings as nations or as peoples, or the things that they the tribes, the different way of gathering them. And I think that this is important, just as we're going to see Jesus bears his own scars. I think our context in the world and who we are actually matters to God. We're in fact bringing those things to this place of worship, which means we're not all going to be looking the same, which means we're not all going to probably be thinking the same about every little thing. We're probably not all going to be singing in the same words or using the same type of instruments or whatever, right? I think the absolute best of who we are in all our diversity of humanity, we bring to this newly created world. We bring who we actually are, not just some vague sense of humanity, to this place of worship, to praising God and the ways that he has worked in all those cultures, in all those languages, in all these very diverse, interesting lives, with all their pain, with all their kind of glory as well. And then the language here is, "And they wore white robes and held palm branches in their hands." Again, these are traditional signs of victory. People who have been in the midst of storms, who have been in the midst of battles, and yet because of that, they are given victory. And in this section, there's these two songs, and I heard someone kind of point out that, again, if this vision is for those of us that are still in the midst of kind of the battle of life, if these songs are for people to be looking forward to being able to sing, who were going to serious persecution from the culture around them, those both who are experiencing that now around the world and the original audience. And they said, maybe these songs were meant to be songs like the ones that people would use as rallying cries, maybe before going into a battle, or the types of songs that people would take onto themselves when they were doing union rallies and things, right? They would come up with these slogans, come up with these songs to kind of fortify themselves, to remember why it is we're doing that. And we've got two great ones here about victory belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. Amen. Blessing and glory, wisdom and thanksgiving, honor and power and might be to our God forever and always. These victory songs are pointing very specifically to who it is that brings victory. It's not us. It's not trying harder. It's not standing strong, although I think those are important lessons Revelation wants it to bring us to. But the ultimate is the only weapon we have to fight, using that kind of military metaphor in here, is God. God brings victory. God gives us those things. We are not going to be enough to overcome the challenges that face us against the world unless our strength comes from God, unless it is God who gives us victory. And so our identity is not one of people who ultimately are strong enough to overcome. It is people who trust in God and God's strength rather than our own. And I think that's a really important just thing to catch in this section and to be encouraged by. Again, it's not our own strength that is going to get us up that mountain. It's God's. God is going to be the strength. God is going to be the one that gets us through. And then this last section is so beautiful. And when the elder in the throne room asks him, like, who are these people exactly? And he says, these are the people that have come out of great hardship, or the great tribulation, or the great suffering, I've seen translated, right? And like it or not, I think this section undercuts one of our kind of most unarticulated assumptions about God, and that is God's job is to keep us and those we care about from difficulty and from harm, right? I think if we're not careful, we can slip into this mentality like, okay, yeah. I did my part of the contract. I showed up, I did my prayers, I read the book, I sat through a lot of bad sermons, like probably the one you're listening to right now, and therefore your job is to protect me and keep me safe and hopeful from harm, right? That is not the promise. These are people who have gone through the great persecution, who've gone through this great hardship. Why? Because they're God's. Just as Jesus had to go through these things, that's the invitation. Come and find true life. But true life is found on the other side of hardship, on the other side of the cross, on the other side of death so much of the time, because that is the world we actually live in. And again, I love this crowd. They're not saints. These are not impressive people. They are those who have washed their robes and made them white in the Lamb's blood, right? That's good old redemption language. That means these are sinners. These are people like you and I. Again, not those that are so holy they can go face down any spiritual darkness in the world. These are people who needed help. These are people who had sins, who needed to wash those away in the blood of the Lamb, using the language here. These are normal, broken people whom God has lifted up. And the setting is very interesting here as well. Both the setting of seeing this just giant worship thing, it's pulling from a bunch of Old Testament language, both of the throne room, right? This royalty, all the power of a king. But that's mixed in with the idea of a temple, which was very central to the Old Testament as well. The idea of holiness, of this special place that only the high priest could go into once a year, because God's very presence could be dangerous if you go in and you are impure, right? And yet these people find themselves in this incredibly lofty place. And then what is it we hear about that they're doing there? What is it we hear about that God is doing there? He's doing something not very lofty. He's not shining. He's not being glorious. They are saying those things, and yet their experience is very daily, is very kind of normal, right? It says they're not going to hunger or thirst. The sun scorching heat's not going to beat down on them, because the Lamb who's in the midst of the throne, the grand, glorious King, will shepherd them, will take care of them, will be the one guiding them and with them, and he will lead them to springs of life-giving water, and God himself will wipe away every tear from their eyes. The ultimate image of God here is not the grandiose king. It's the sacrificed lamb and the parent who is comforting. The intimacy is almost shocking in this grand setting of the throne room, of the temple of God in all his holiness. And yet God is there comforting and acknowledging the pain and is making it better. And so I love this section. I love just that this is where things are all headed in the midst of the storminess that is the book itself, in the midst of the storminess that our experience of life often is. And yet, I think Revelation overall just kind of always asks us questions. We can want to skip to these sections and just wish we were there and wish that we didn't have to go through the Great Tribulation. And yet, the questions that I think we're always asked to look at ourselves as we're looking at this book is, okay, what sorts of things should Christians do to draw the culture's ire? The culture is often mad at us who say we are Christians these days. But is it because we are so kind? Is it because we are serving so self-sacrificially and lovingly, they're kind of embarrassed? Or is it because we're just being judgmental jerks? Are we about the kind of things that Christ was about? Are we doing the kinds of things, the kinds of challenges of culture through kindness and in including the outsider and healing that which is broken that ended him up on the cross? Or are we at odds with those around us for selfish reasons, for reasons that are all about us? Where is it that we are placing our hope? Is it in God? Is it in the systems of the world? Is it in ourselves or our bank accounts or our talents or our friends, whatever? Or are we trusting what these people trusted in? Their victory is none other than the Lamb, who is a comforting parent. How else might this vision of where all of human history, of where our lives are headed, inspire us to change within our own hearts and to extend God's love to those around us? Those, I think, are the questions Revelation wants us to ask and to inspire us to be able to continue to overcome.